Hello, everybody, and welcome along to another one of these interviews by me, Ben Calder, for the Bowen Therapy Professional Association, the BTPA. And I'm really excited today to have friend, colleague, mentor, teacher, as she has been to me over the last years that I've been doing Bowen, Paula Esson. Paula, thank you for joining me here today.
You're so welcome, Ben. Great to be here.
For you to start.
Oh, hey. Well, that's. You said the interview is going to be like 30 minutes or so. It could expand somewhat here, Ben.
As long as we need it to be.
But yeah, let's get back to the grassroots of this for myself. I was the lead sports scientist at Gateshead College, having set up national diplomas and HNDs and basically sports science for students. But in a nutshell, within that time, I had my son Callum, and I had a caesarean section for which I went to traditional physiotherapy for. That didn't seem to sort of help the what I was struggling with, or the various aspects of my health that I was struggling with. And that ranged from, headaches to back pain, to all sorts of things that happened post-section. So that was a bit of sort of a shock to the system as such. And then somebody introduced me to Julian Wilson at Hexham Leisure Centre while I was coaching a basketball game, of all things. And they said, come and have a go at this. And I remember thinking, what on earth was that? I've never known anything like it. It really was a case of, don't call me, I'll call you. And then 2 days later, I was out of pain. And it was like, I've been in pain for like 18 months. So this was quite an interesting revelation. And as a scientist, I wanted to know more. And that's how it started. So I questioned Julian Wilson quite a lot, on this. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. And so I was on the nervous system, I was on the anatomy, he says, go and train. And that's when it started in 1998. So it's, a few decades ago now, Ben. And eventually it ended up that I left my position in sports science to train as a practitioner, which led to an incredibly successful clinic in Claypath Medical Centre alongside doctors. And then that led into teaching again because I was already a teacher. So that made sense. And so I worked for ECBS for many years and then went off and developed the NHIP centres, which is the Health North centres, and assisted in the Badminton Centre as well, and the one in Iceland too. And that was all for pain management and reaching people who were struggling to get the help they needed from mainstream systems, but needed an intervention where they could get some pain relief, some movement, some listening and some understanding. So that was great to have that multi-disciplinary model in there with Bowen. So it wasn't just a standalone. So that was excellent. And as the time has progressed, I've worked out the time I start projects, I implement them, and then I move on to the next project. So that's the kind of mindset I have. I love working in big teams. So I've then toddled off basically into professional sport again, started with basketball again, and now I'm working mostly with professional football. So I'm on tour a lot, Ben. I'm on the road a lot. I go to France on Thursday to do some work with the Catalan Dragons, and then bounce all over the place again, back to St Mirren, Iceland, and so it goes on. But that's the travel bug in me. That's in relation to the Bowen Technique. Something I have been thoroughly fascinated in for a very long time, and hugely supportive and passionate about the fact that treatment should be gentle, non-invasive, and can get remarkable results if you just get out of the client's way and let them sort themselves. But that has to be wrapped alongside, strength and conditioning, coaching, nutrition, help with the mind, etc. So that's kind of been my journey so far. And now I'm challenging myself at a much higher level in professional sport and women's football on a much global scale, basically. And I teach for the BC UK. So that's me.
The fastest snapshot in history, how to encapsulate 30 years or so into a really small window. So,
I'm still smiling.
Which is the main bit. It tells you how much that work is beautiful stuff to do. And I'm going to kind of jump back into a few bits there, because when you and I first came together, I came and did your what was the Sport One. Bowen was the first time you and I kind of had a formal training together, and the NIHP, the Northern Integrative Health Practice, was just beginning then. And I love, one of the things, because I was really getting into integral theory at the time. And so that concept of looking at multiple dimensions within individuals, mind, body, the cultures, the environments, the various aspects of it was, and still is for me, really important stuff. But just for again, people that might not come into it, tell us a little bit about what that model was and how it developed and what you were including in that. Because I think it's really, really important for people to know that this this is some of the stuff that's going on.
Yeah, it developed and sort of emerged because basically the NHS system is a brilliant system, as we know, has been struggling and continues to struggle. And I think it's in many ways it's right to struggle and to change at the moment. So to allow all those other disciplines that are out there and much more timely available to help people out. So when we started off with NHIP in 2009, my vision board was very much of this has to have multi approaches to it, the mind, body, spirit, activity, movement. It had pharmacy involved in there as well as quite high grade psychiatry and top level consultants from pain management. And what we noticed was it was a number of different things. It was the culture, it was the environment, and we very specifically put our centres in places of obvious need. For the northeast of England, that was, of course, the demise of the coal industry, Margaret Thatcher's influence on that, and destroying numerous small coal mining villages. So Sacriston was a perfect location, taking over an old GP surgery, to put in a model for the community, to give them the opportunity that those who had maybe more easier access to finance or easier access to systems, to give them the same system. And that system involved hands-on treatments, whether that was physiotherapy, physical therapy, sports massage, the Bowen Technique, which is our favourite, acupuncture, osteopathy, and then from the mind side, we had all the counselling services, mental health support, lifestyle support, and then we had nutritionists. And on top of that, overarching the whole program was Dr. David Laird on the pain management side. So he would steer the whole thing. And we actually won the procurements on that, Ben. They were big. There were hundreds of thousands of pounds procurements to actually deliver the service, which meant that all staff got paid. And the most important thing of all was the client didn't have to pay anything. So it became an NHS service, and an NHS service that's still in existence. And we've tried to sort of copycat that across the country. That's harder than you'd expect because of the different trusts that are involved, but we're still on that one. And I think the biggest achievement that came out, although there were multiple achievements treating thousands of people over numbers of years and still do, it was that whole thing of we changed the opioid use. So we managed to ditch down the use of morphine and high grade pharmacy that everyone's shouting about in the community. They don't want to be on drugs. So we don't want to be on drugs. What's the intervention we're going to do? And that intervention for us was to get strong, eat a more healthy lifestyle, get the hands-on treatments you need, get the listening skills you need, and therefore be able to engage in your life a lot better and stop that sort of downward spiral as such, to keep people's health and independence and happiness. So that was the model. And it's a model that's definitely working.
Yeah, beautiful. And this is it. I think the more that we look around the world, there are pockets of these models taking place. And there are more and more people like yourself at high levels who fully recognize that without that integrative approach, we're actually missing some quite fundamental and quite important stuff in what recovery's around. And, you love Bowen, I love Bowen, such a beautiful practice, but in integral theory, it's a whole-on, it's a whole part. It works beautifully within itself, but it is also subject to a greater whole, and it needs to be involved and integrated into that process. So, and I'm curious, within that NIHP, what was the most difficult thing when you were trying to bring these essentially complementary processes in and bring things like Bowen in? What was the real challenge of getting the NHS and the consultant level to accept what you were doing?
That actually is an incredibly excellent question, because behind the scenes, what people don't see, of course, is that iceberg effect, isn't it? It's the amount of tenaciousness and dogged dedication it takes to actually put your shoulder to the flywheel on something like this and keep your shoulder to the flywheel on until it turns, even though it's detrimental sometimes to your own health, and progress, because the bigger picture was so much more important. So the toughest challenge I faced was getting the acceptance. There was a lot of skepticism and cynicism around what complementary therapy could do. I think some of it was justified because there wasn't enough sensible evidence around the results we were getting. So we had to do a lot of work on research collection to actually demonstrate that these were the results, whether it was anecdotal or not. more formal results in clinic measurements themselves, to sort of demonstrate exactly what it was we were achieving and how that was impacting them in someone's daily life. Because ultimately that was about. We can see that person for 1 hour, or they come in for an injection, or they come in for a bit of treatment, but they go home and that's it. They can't move, and they've got problems with their relationships, and they've got problems with their finances, and their environment. They've got dreadful neighbours. Whatever happens to be, that whole collective thing was part of the challenge. So the biggest challenge for me was to get them to understand what the model was, and then to sit outside the top people's offices until they were bored of me, basically. And it got to that case where the senior executive, I sat outside his office at 9 a.m. every morning for 3 weeks until he said, just come and talk to me for 10 minutes and I'll listen to you. And it takes that sometimes, that level of dedication. Otherwise, we're letting our own ego involved in there, that we know what we're talking about and they're on the other side. And I've seen a lot of that in complementary therapy. That's like, we know what we're doing and they're over there. And we're as bad for not listening to the NHS as we are, they're not listening to us. So I always wanted to bridge that, in that each had its own approach and philosophy. And the one with the more power, which is the NHS, actually can give you that opportunity if you talk to them correctly and you sound reasonably sensible. And once they tried the model out, and it's Dave Laird that pushed it over the line in the end with myself in the meeting, that procurement was sealed, and and it was absolute groundbreaker. But it was not easy, and it took an awful lot of resources, mentally and emotionally, to do it, and great people around us as well delivering in the team.
Yeah, and I think if we were ever going to give you a special middle name, then Tenacious would definitely be something that would suit you there. Because again, without people being willing to get into that and do that, it's difficult. But highlighting that importance of understanding that it's more than just that physical thing. It's more than just the injury or the surgery or the trauma or whatever it is physically that's going on that is impacting the way that somebody's body is responding, their mind is responding. And I'm curious if this is partly what's drawn you now towards the neuroscience side of things, in the I mean, I don't know how it is for you, but for me it's kind of like, I don't think there's ever enough time in my life to fully understand all of the dimensions that could really be involved. I think as time goes on, I don't know if I'm mastering anything or just becoming more of a jack of all trades, because I find that having, maybe like a good chef, a sprinkle of different parts is what really makes the stew. But is that part of what took you over onto that neuroscience side of things?
I think so. I could see that the Bowen Technique was achieving, a vast majority of the results I was after. But when something like, say, PDTR was explained to me, and then I witnessed it with my good colleague Dave McGettigan, who's I was involved with him as a mentor when he was in his 20s. He's now on his way to 40, and it's and children, and you're just like, okay. And I sat and listened, and it made sense. If we can take the water level down on a neural stimulus in the body, level that out so that it's nice and equal, so it's not sort of kicking off the brain in its simplest terms to set off a pain response or any other sort of negative stimulus response that you want, then we're on the right track. And that made sense from a kinesiology point of view and a kinetic point of view, that if I have in its simplistic form, my upper trapezius is doing this into my shoulder, is coming from various things. It's coming from a memory of a situation. It's coming from a behavioral pattern that's just been there for so long, or a repetitive pattern. And I'm doing this, then it means that 4 or 5 other muscles aren't doing what they need to be doing. And that's just kicking off a tension, a hypertonicity, and a problem. That made sense to me. And then it's following that down the wormhole, basically, of how that can come out in the body. And what's so interesting and intriguing about it is just how far away the problem can be affecting the pain stimulus. And Dr. Ryderov always said this, where you think it isn't. So it's and it was that side that really intrigued me. And then getting that reorganization is almost like, giving the body more resources and more energy and more ability to perform. And that's why I use that in football. It's often a coach will turn around and say, well, they're not performing well today, or they're not as energetic, or they're not as explosive as they'd normally be. and we go and reorganize it the way they're recruiting the muscles of their hallucis, say flexor. You've got, a quad that's not working alongside the glute, and you repattern that, and suddenly they're working on all cylinders again. That fascinates me, and I think the Bowen technique achieves a lot of that with less cerebral effort from the practitioner's point of view and the client's point of view, because neuroscience work is active work, whereas Bowen work is more passive, in that frame. But the two together just married beautifully, so I could tick more boxes to assist that person out of pain and into function. So and also it melts my head, and I like things that melt my head.
Not that you're a glutton for punishment at all, and that brain that just wants to understand that thing, and I think that's an important distinction that's in here. Is that we don't like as Bowen practitioners as a collective to not necessarily understand that neuroscience at the level that you're looking at it doesn't stop the technique from being an effective tool in creating change. But part of what you're doing is creating this leading edge, this tip of the spear to understand, well, what's going on when we do that stuff? What are we actually doing? Which is such important stuff to have.
Absolutely, and that goes out to all Bowen practitioners out there, or would-be Bowen practitioners. If people are looking to train in this work, it is totally, if it's the Bowen technique in particular, it's totally accessible, because its key ingredients to me are having a good heart, and good hands, and an extremely excellent intention. And if all of those things are in place, then the next bit is just a practical piece. And us at the spearhead is just purely, that's personality based. So I'm intrigued at that level, but it is far from essential to nail all of this, because if you start to think, oh, I couldn't do the Bowen technique because I couldn't possibly understand neuroscience or physiology at that level, it's not about that. That's like past your driving test as such. Learn to drive, and then you can play around on the skinny pads, and that's the way I've done it. And putting yourself in those situations, I've been many a times I've been in tears. I remember there was one time in London on a neuroscience training, I was in the loo just going, oh my word, I'm never going to get this. This is impossible. Everyone else seems to get it, and I don't understand a word they've just said. And it's because it was a mirror neuron effect on me that the problem they were talking about, I actually had. So it
Sure.
cancelled itself out. So then you just hit a in your head, and you can't compute, absorb it, or understand it. And then someone came into the loo and they could hear me like, you okay? I went, yeah, I'm doing neuroscience. And they went, ah, yes. And a little chocolate and tissue came under the door. And it was like, here you go. You're going to be okay. It's because whatever they're teaching is, you have the problem too. So it was like, now that makes sense. So they'll need to clear that off. So
Wow.
it's really important that this work's totally accessible. And I think that's where Jahan's coming at it as well. I've been teaching this too in Ballymena, that I want anyone that is working with people to have this in their hands as first aid, as a qualified level, so that they can get the assistance they need as the problem occurs. So we don't get the pattern in, it doesn't get established, and then we don't get the secondaries.
Yeah. And I totally resonate with that kind of stuff going over your head. I remember the first time I went to an epigenetics seminar with Chris Astle-Smith. He's been I first got introduced to him 20 years ago, and he's been a mentor of mine now for the last 10 years. And the first seminar, I walked out and it was just like, I don't know that I recall anything about that seminar other than I didn't think I could do it. And it literally took me 10 years before I could step back in the room with him and listen to him again. And then it all started to make sense. So and I think for some people, especially as they're entering the Bowen world or they've been in there for a little while, they perhaps don't appreciate that there's this repetitive nature of walking the same path repeatedly, but looking for different things on that journey. It's easy for us to kind of switch off, like you drive your car to work and you follow the same road. It's easy to switch off and not know how you got from one point to another. But I think what you said there about having a good heart, hands, presence, being willing to be with the body, and just really sinking into that and having that little curiosity about what is it that's going on here and what can I do to affect a change here that's valuable and beneficial.
Yeah. Exactly. It's about not being too academic. It's about being human, isn't it? And bringing that humanistic approach, to it. There's so many people out there have all those skills already. It's just not been put into something like Bowen. And then they apply that work and they see the changes in everyone that they come into connection with. Then the power of that in its true sense of the word comes through, and how humbling and unbelievable it is to help somebody out of pain and back into their lives. There's no better achievement in the world, I think.
No, it's beautiful. I want to take another little step back as well, because you very quickly dropped in the work, the PDTR. And just for anybody listening in as well, I mean, again, through the sport too, you started introducing me to some of that work. I love watching some of Dave's videos as well on Instagram. He's got some really interesting stuff. But can you just tell us a little bit about that, and how you see that as a dovetail in with Bowen as well?
Yeah, the way that I'm perceiving this, I mean, PDTR stands for proprioceptive deep tendon reflex. Yeah, which basically means that in order to try and put it in a simplistic form, that anything that sort of occurs to the body, you may well have a reaction to neurologically, or what we call a nociceptive reaction to. So in terms of sort of nociception, then a stimulus will cause you to do the original take your hand off the fire. Now, all the different sort of muscles involved just in that one action, unless that's sort of reset, then the chances are you will maintain the tensions in reverse. So if I do my hand out like this, it's my rhomboids that have been involved with that. It's the posterior deltoid. It's the extensors of the back are forcing me backwards. But unless something comes in to say there's actually no threat, you will hold a certain level of that tension in the reverse position. And to give a perfect example of that, I think it's best to explain this in examples. I had a 24-year-old footballer who had a right-hand side hernia. Yeah, so an inguinal hernia, unusual for a female and unusual for that young. Not unusual in male footballers, but more unusual in female. But when we started looking further into the system, I noticed she had a burn on the inside of her right gastrocs. And then I said, "Oh, how did you get that?" "Well, that was a great holiday in Greece," she said. But I managed to touch my leg on the exhaust. And that exhaust had created a nociceptive withdrawal. She'd used her quads to contract up at speed and her hip flexors and everything else around that right inguinal to get her away from the burn. Yeah. So then that created that tensional pattern inside that whole groin area, which led to the connective tissue then being more potential and tight to then, when used in football, in hip extension, it then tore, which wouldn't have happened if she hadn't had the burn, if you see what I mean. So it's about PDTR repatterns all of that to say, take the tension out of that muscle, put the right tension back into this muscle. And it uses all the receptors to do that. And each one of the receptors has its own stimulus. And Dr. Jose Palomar worked that out. I mean, how he's worked it out is the mind of a genius. That he's actually worked every single stimulus out as to what gets the right response. Yeah. And resets it. And that's kind of how it works. And you can take that all the way through to brain nuclei and emotions. And for me, I'm not that clever, so I like sticking around the physical side of things and patterning for physical performance. And I stay in my lane. And that's sensible to stay in your lane and let the ones who are trained in psychology and so the mind and brain nuclei to work out that piece. So I work in teams, and that's very healthy. But PDTRs, I think, is very, very groundbreaking. It dovetails Bowen, and this is just my opinion now, Ben, from what I've witnessed through the years of working with both. It's what Bowen does. It brings the body back to what PDTR would call basic, in the green. So basic in the green means you're close to neural perfection in that system, but not quite. So I've witnessed that Bowen can bring a lot of it back by introducing the safety in the amygdala and how the limbic system's working, and then allow that fight or flight just to drop. And then the PDTR does the rest of it, and then tidies it up and makes it right. That's how I've witnessed it and how I've worked with it. And I try to do PDTR from the start. It takes me a lot more time and a lot more thought and a lot more testing. Yeah. But I witnessed with Bowen, it brings it, back into a good status quo from the beginning. Yeah. So that's a lot of the work done first, and then we're just tidy.
And when you mention the word testing there within PDTR, are you talking about using kinesiology as a monitoring system within that?
Yeah, the monitoring system is based partly on kinesiology, and the PDTR piece is the bit that he's done differently. So we know that sort of the simple part of that is taking something from being a hypertonic or muscle to being back to normal tension, or a hypo muscle back to normal tension, either way. But what he's done is he's created this reflex action in it, which sort of sets the work, which is different to what we've been doing before with kinesiology. So it's I quite like that, and it just means we go around sort of bashing people between the eyes and tapping them on their Achilles and on the patella tendon, which a doctor would use for testing reflexes in itself.
Yeah, sure. Fabulous. I love the way that some of these tools have, somebody's taken a look at the same thing and gone, do you know, we can do something else with this. And it has a completely, all those years of doctors tapping those patella tendons and not thinking about what else that might be used for, because it's just in there as a simple assessment for them.
Used as a body in the research as well in London, which meant, because he's a doctor, he can use needles, and he elicited, it was very interesting, and I wanted to be at the body within that, to experience it from start to finish and embody it. Yeah. Kind of wish I didn't, because it was quite an interesting process. And there all the Russian scientists are sitting there with their computers and things. It was all very up there. And basically he elicited what a Golgi receptor response in my posterior deltoid. And a Golgi receptor response, mechanoreceptor response, is that toothache, icky, nauseating feeling when people turn up with that horrible shoulder stuff and I just feel really sick, and it's anything worse is toothache. Yeah. And he actually elicited that by using a needle. Thanks, Jose. Yeah. And then he got all carried away with what they're doing. I'm wondering if I'm going to throw up or pass out, or both. Yeah. And I'm sitting there going, when's this going to end? And then he elicited the correction. Yeah. And then all the screens, I didn't see it, wasn't allowed to see it for making sure the trial was right. But the moment he elicited the PDTR correction for the Golgi, the pain went away. And so did everything on the screens changed too. And that gave me the evidence to say, all right, that works as a neuroregulation. It really does. So now we apply that, if I've got just a bit of shoulder pain remaining and I've done beautiful Bowen work and that's got most of it, I'll then elicit that pair. And that will change the stimulus and take away the last percentage of discomfort.
It's one of the things I've always loved about acupuncture as well, and I'm very fortunate that I've got a very good acupuncturist where I am, and we have some amazing discussions. But there are times when she'll drop a needle into somewhere, and and I understand the channel she's putting it in, and often what the relationship at the point is, but just the effect it can create so far away from where the needle is, and I find I'm very sensitive to those responses. So we love spending that time together, my acupuncturist and I, because of that interaction, and it is quite incredible. But yes. I'm kind of curious as well. I know when I first met you, you were very much involved with high-level basketball. You came back into that for a little while, but now you've moved into football. So tell us about some of the issues that have been coming up and that you're resolving through the work that you're doing and within Bowen for that.
Now this is interesting. Okay. I got back into, basically I just get called by people who go, I don't know what she's doing. It does look kind of groovy. We've got a problem with the player, and it could be anywhere across the world. Yeah. So I've got a problem with a player that we can't resolve, but I'm open-minded enough to hear what other people are saying about that person's reputation. So we go ahead. So where I operate is very much on the ground, with the players and their ongoing injuries. But more importantly, I'm working in the system that's going into place to prevent it in the first place. Mm-hmm. And that's why Iceland did so well. One of the reasons why Iceland team did so well is because we were preventing injuries, so that they were a strong squad. They weren't sort of picking up the pieces left, right, and centre, because that's difficult for the managers to manage, the coaches to manage, and of course for the player themselves. Now, particularly in women's football, which is a really intriguing scientific interest for me, is that we have, because of their anatomy and because of the changes in football boots and because of the changes in football surfaces to AstroTurf and 5G and all this, then what happens is that we're getting a lot of ACL injuries or cruciate ligament injuries. Mm-hmm. And of course, these are very, very destructive to the person's playing career and their whole well-being and everything else. So where I've been working is on ACL protocol. And so we've been putting in new warm-up systems, warm-down systems, training systems, I will come in with the Bowen Technique to re-establish the balance between the quads, the hamstrings, and the surrounding structures to stabilize the ACL and the PCL as well, and the collateral ligaments too. And then even more importantly on top of that is like, how do we overarch this internationally or nationally at the moment, that we got involved with Oxford University and SportSmart. And SportSmart, that's a real groundbreaker again. It's that they've got an app where we can record all the injuries at the point of injury, and it all goes into the system. So it doesn't matter how that player injured, whether I was there or not, I have it all comes through on my computer. And then I can immediately send out the training program and their support systems, and also their well-being system, because it's an ACL, they're out. We've got 3 at the moment who are waiting for operations, and that's a season and a half. So what are we doing with them within that season and a half? So this is where the holistic side of things comes in. That those players will regularly come in for Bowen work to keep their mental health and well-being going and keeping their pain under control. But also we then impart all sorts of performance coaching. We get them to take coaching badges. We involve them in the social side of stuff. So we never let that player end up sitting on their sofa at home with FOMO, basically. Yeah. And then they leave the system and they leave football because of that. So you're talking top level players here, and internationally and nationally, Lionesses, Scottish Football Association. This is a real problem. And where Bowen fits in with all of that is huge, because it gives a connection to someone who cares. It gives a connection to hands-on work that controls their response to what's happening to them. And so that's in football. That's where we're working at the moment. And then on top of that, we strength train, of course. So we prevent it completely. And that's we look at the profiles we're looking to see change over the next few seasons. So it's a 5-year project to start off with, and we're introducing it from grassroots academy level all the way through to the senior team.
Incredible. And that's exactly how it should be. I can remember one of the things that stuck with me ever since we did that Sport 1 together is that often those injuries that are showing up for people in their 20s, 30s and 40s are untreated childhood injuries that never got fully resolved. And so those problems are still remaining. So to make sure that and again, it's a time of evolution, isn't it? When we think back to PE back when we were kiddies and we were just there in your pumps, and there was hardly any real understanding about the science of the effects of what's happening to our bodies and the difference, both positive and negative, that it might be making. So now we've got so much more information and insight that these programs can be designed in such a way that actually you're managing the health of young people all the way through their careers. And I don't think people sometimes realize, I look at it in both in terms of people within sporting fields, but also people in professional music, that the lifestyles they lead are incredibly demanding. And the idea of lost work days, which we understand from a financial point of view if it was a corporation or a business, in the same way for the people in professional sport, that's really difficult. And if you literally can't do the one thing that you've trained to do for decades, sometimes the psychological effect that it has, the cultural effect that it has, let alone the financial effect that it has, is so significant that to be able to look at this from a systemic point of view and say, if we can change those things, actually the outcomes we have over time are so much healthier.
Oh, absolutely. And it's if you think like you and I have been working within this for many years, and exactly that, we have injuries that walk in that we know could have been stopped with the right systems there at the start. So in many ways, we've had to have that conversation with senior teams to say, guess what? I'm sorry, but this isn't for you. And in terms of like putting the new system in, it's for the under 14s and the under 12s, the under 10s. Yeah. My own stepson here, Joshua, he's a rugby player for Ballymena, and he came in for a rugby tournament on Saturday, looking like he'd been, been through a mincer of some sort. And he'd had a nasty, he'd hit his head on the ground, had a nasty whiplash, and then then it's noticing things like he didn't want his dinner. I think, why don't you want your dinner? We got a concussion now, so we take him through the concussion protocol. And once I got the concussion protocol in place, and then putting Bowen in, and he didn't want it because it was sore. And it was like a little tear was coming. I don't want you to do this. I said, you know what? I know you don't get it, but this is brilliant. And I can reset you now rather than 10 years down the line. And in 10 years' time, you'll probably thank me. But now you just want me to get my hands off you. But the next morning he woke up. And I was like, how's that head? He was chomping away on his breakfast and quite happy. And he was like, the usual thing we get with Bowen, why, what problem? And then you go, that problem, never mind. I won't remind you of the problem you've forgotten about that you had, but you definitely had yesterday. So,
Incredible.
yeah.
And that's it. And that to me, that's always been the best outcome for changing lives, is the fact that they almost don't know that anything, don't know what happened. It's just all right again. And
It's all all right. And how
yeah,
wonderful is that? Is that they're just, I've always tried to get to the bottom, Ben, of what I don't know how to explain this, guys, but when you have this treatment, you'll just feel yourself again. And whatever that means to you, not anybody else, not everybody else's definition, but just internally, you'll feel like you. And
yeah,
they go, what do you mean? And I actually can't explain that to you. There are no words. It is just a feeling.
yeah,
And
yeah.
they go, okay, and they'll come back and go,
I think that's a very common thing. I mean, for 20 years, I've been refining how I even try and describe kinesiology or Bowen technique for people. And it's just kind of like, I don't know. And I've got quite a few clients that say, there's no point in me trying to explain what he does. Just go and see him. He'll be fine. You'll
yeah.
feel better for it.
Clients get
Now,
themselves a bit of a squash with that one, don't they? They go and explain to somebody else, and somebody else turns up in your clinic. They tried to explain to me, but
yeah,
no.
yeah. And of course, my joke always at that point is, right, if you don't know what we're doing, I'll go and get the chicken and the Bacardi and we'll start the ritual and get it going.
Yes. Yeah, and I think it's very healthy. I think this is the thing with Bowen practitioners as well, Ben, that we know that this is out of our power and our control. And I think I've always feel this way. It's like when someone says it's definitely like this, or the system definitely works in this way, and that's 100% that way. I'll go, I'm not so sure. Let's just leave this to the individual to unscramble. Just give them the right information without any threat and without any persuasion. And
Yeah.
and then it seems to sort of work perfectly.
Yeah. I mean, and even when I spoke to Ron Phelan recently about this, he was saying that there were people that Tom Bowen kind of got to the point where he was like, "No, I know I can't do anything for this," and he knew there was always a percentage of work that wasn't going to achieve a result because it was beyond what he was trying to achieve in there. And I think it's a very healthy thing, and this is another reason why I'm such a big advocate for, as you are, kind of teams, multidisciplinary approach, is the fact that there's always far more complex a picture going on than we can ever really encapsulate. So we do what we do and we do it to the best of our abilities. And if that isn't what's necessary, then refer it and find the person that's the right fit for what we're perceiving as being the core issues there.
Oh, I can't. There's nothing healthier than sitting around a table with colleagues, and you've in the same way the NHS would do when they're dealing with somebody about how they're going to approach an operation or how they're going to approach, the care and recovery of somebody. That everyone sits together and puts their percentage of support in and how they think, and you come to a lovely agreement all together about this is what we're going to look to achieve, and then adjust accordingly. And I think it's it's very, very healthy.
Yeah. So I'm kind of curious as well. Obviously, there's been a massive amount of development for you over the last, since the late 90s, as you've been working in this. Is there anything that's really fundamentally changed? Is there anything you've kind of dropped and given up that you'd look back at now and go, I'm glad I don't do it that anywhere? And is there anything that you kind of didn't think that you were going to embrace that you have?
Ooh, that's a tough question. Okay, let's try and work this one through. I've always found it complex to work with anything where there's corporate involved. I think there's a very strange relationship between corporate and finance and well-being and that side of things. So even though I've always wanted to introduce it into corporate setups, like take any large company and go, they need a program like this. When I've actually gone to implement that, it's not felt aligned, like almost like the well-being of that employee needs to be outside of the business.
Mm.
As in they receive it in a completely different building, treatment place, and not part of it. Would I change anything we've done so far? I think I'd have trained a lot more in terms of how to do more tenders and
Mhm.
procurements
Mm.
to get that out there. And I think I'd have been braver, although I am now, in terms of getting more into the media and getting the word out there even further. So the Bowen Technique became people would be synonymous with that if you had the regular back pain, shoulder pains, neck pains, they knew they had that safety card in their pocket for someone to go to resolve it. I think those are the only things I would really change. I mean, always, like everything, there's always organizational politics and things, and I've always found those difficult because I think I'm quite an innocent soul. Just want everything to be okay, and it's more complex than that, as we know. And so there's not much I would change. The Bowen work in itself, in my mind, doesn't need changing. Yeah, and I think Tom Bowen himself, the originator, incredible man that he was, had nailed it at that point, and that needs to be explored more over the centuries. But whenever I've tried to diversify away from the simplicity of the move, or do something what was seen to be more complex and somehow increase my reputation somehow or some weird way, that I'd get it wrong. It was like, no, it is what it is. You take the skin back, you challenge. What I've always wanted to do is know more about is what's connecting to what, why it's doing what it's doing, and how do I apply that to more efficacy, as I go forward, so that my toolbox is stronger.
Yeah.
That's it. But I wouldn't change anything in regards to the actual work itself. I'd like to see it more in mainstream. I would.
Yeah. And do you, within the work that you do, especially because you've gone down the neuroscience side of it, do you still look at that relationship into acupuncture and the way that the meridians work as something that is significant and beneficial in how you look at it?
Yeah. It's I mean, like you, I've got good acupuncturists around which I refer to, so I don't go down the whole need to learn, the whole understanding of acupuncture. But when we talk with the acupuncturists and I bring the PDTR in, we see there's so much crossover that we're definitely following the channels. The same with the MSTR work, the scar work, Alistair McLaughlin's work. That when I've got a scar on a line, I go and look up which meridian that's sitting on. And what else is affecting, and then align that with their symptoms and what they're explaining, then you can see there's absolutely a relationship between what is occurring. Yes. So in terms of everything, I still think that all of those are absolutely in line with each other, for sure.
And is there anything that you wish you'd been taught when you started that's become fundamental to how you practice now?
Running a business.
Sure.
I think if we're absolutely serious about Bowen Technique and where it's going forwards, it's we have so many good practitioners that have sort of come out as great with their hands, and it's like, but it's, as we know, it's a percentage of what we do, and how to actually sort of get that out into the community and make it successful, so it can be your career and not a hobby. I think is the next bold step for the Bowen Technique, and that is happening, as far as I'm aware. So it's really exciting, and I think I'd want as much innocence around as possible. I started Bowen Technique, I can jump out of one career and have Bowen trained over here, and I'm going to be multi-successful, and everything's going to be fine, and it's actually a lot more interesting than that.
Yeah, for sure. And certainly, in the last 10 years that I've had Centre for Integral Health, 11 years now nearly, and over this 20 years for me, if there's one thing I think that has caused the failure of more therapists than anything else, it's not having that business knowledge. And whenever I've mentored or supported new practitioners, the one thing I've said to them is, now that you've learned how to do the thing that you want to do, now go and learn how to be a business, because they're two very different beasts. And I'm really glad to see that both Bowen College and CBS are both putting much more emphasis into creating business training for their practitioners, so that we don't spend all that time and energy and money in training and then not manage to convert it into something that is a win-win situation for us and the people that we treat.
I couldn't agree more, and hats off to both CBS and to the Bowen College as well. That we've just finished BCUK's marketing training, as well as teachers, and it's moving so fast now, isn't it, with AI and the social media side of things, and that keeping up with that is absolutely essential, and that's where PDTR actually talked about this years ago. That whole computer side of stuff and things that in a different world to our own minds is actually where it's all heading, and we need to sort of stay up with it. Otherwise, we'd be mothballed at very high speed. And I don't want that to happen. I think having you there, Ben, on this side, doing doing what you're doing now, this interview, which is also going to be AI'd, shows that we're heading in the right direction and can lift the Bowen Technique further from that. But the business side of things, I think it needs to run parallel. And would I have it any other way? Absolutely not. It's a 7-day-a-week thing, but when I actually look at it, every single one of those days I'm fully enjoying. When I take a day off, then it is purely to sort of reboot the systems as such and get back into it again, because it's not 1 hour I think feels like work.
Yes, yeah, and that's I heard Jimmy Carr recently talking about, if you can find something that you enjoy doing and people will pay you for it, then that's it. It's as good as it gets. But I do want to just put,
there's a
yeah,
thing about money, and me, I love that story that goes where someone turns and goes into a hotel or that, and they have €100, and they have to pay €100 to the counter. Well, they said, I want to see every single hotel room. So they go and look at every single hotel room. And during that time, that €100 gets taken away and it gets used in 4 or 5 different places. And it actually ends up getting, this is the little short story of it, gets brought back to the reception before the guys looking at the rooms, takes this €100 back. And this is it, it's understanding not to hold on and let money move about, and let it move about a lot. And then you'll have a successful Bowen business for sure.
Yeah. I do want to put a little kind of qualification in here, just for anybody listening, that I promise that Paula and I are not deep state fake. It really is us here today. So as much as AI is going to get involved, it's only going to be to make sure that the production value of this is as reasonable as we can make it. Now, I'm curious as well. We've been chatting now for a good period of time, but I'm curious for you, manual therapy and Bowen evolving over the next decade or so, and what do you think we should be exploring that isn't being given enough attention?
All right. Yes. Okay. This is about professionalism now, and where I think it's going. I have thought it's been going for well over 14, 15 years. When we set up NHIP, I was involved at the government level as well, because you have to be in these sort of situations. And it's very clear to me that the white papers that are happening now, and we're all feeling it, what's happening with the system. It was only last week that Sunak was saying that they may be taking away the powers of GPs to write sick notes. And, outsourcing is happening left, right, and centre. Now, the next question that comes from the back of that is, what fills the gap? Now, this is where we sit with a beautiful safety net that what Bowen can do for physiology and what it can do for generalized pain and things that have people rocking up at the GPs or A&E. And I'm not talking about a dirty great wound here, or severe abdominal pain, or cancer diagnosis, or any other major illness. That's exactly where we need the GPs, or exactly where we need our outpatients and everything else. I think potentially, and I'm hopeful, that what we're seeing is an alignment, a sensible alignment, that the NHS is going to be used as it should be used, and qualified, sensible, reliable, reputable practices outside of that will be used. Now, our job as Bowen practitioners and people running the Bowen Technique need to make sure that we are up to standard for that. So there's not a single doubt in the people that are scrutinizing that. They look at it and go, wow, okay, that is structured, that is organized, that is safe, it is qualified, and those people who have got as much as we can dealing with humans, that we know to the best of our resources that those practitioners are good to go and will be able to help people and should take the pressure off the system. And that's what I'm witnessing is happening. And it may be in my lifetime, I hope, that we see, and I think it's reflecting in our clinics now that, I don't know about you, but I'm incredibly busy and I'm not doing much marketing. It's just word of mouth. Don't wait for the system to catch up with you. Get treatment now. In preparation for that back operation that you won't get for 3 years.
Exactly.
So it's just about being sensible and going, you can put your politics into one position, say, I'm not going to spend any money on having treatment. I'm going to wait for the NHS. But I think that tide is turning, and those with very left-wing politics, including myself, from a socialist point of view, are having to admit that, no, I need to pay for this bit. This is my responsibility. And then the NHS that I'm paying for will also provide for me where I need it. And so that's where I think Bowen is going, ducks in line as well. And then we have done over many years, and we're the next stage of evolution. And that's thanks to people like you and many other people involved with the management of Bowen. So thank you.
And again, this is the encouragement for the Bowen therapists that aren't thinking about this. This is why BTPA, we recommend that you become CNHC registered as well, because again, that link up into the government end of things, those T's have got to be crossed, those I's have got to be dotted. We've got to make sure that we're at that level for people. And I really hope as well, that as you commented about the taking away GPs from writing sick notes and so on. I just hope that what we're not going to see is another PPE scandal over the COVID years as well, and where really we're just seeing ridiculous amounts of cash being pumped into the wrong places and effectively being wasted.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think there's a huge opportunity now, for what we've always wanted, really, isn't it? It can be a lot more streamlined than this and a lot more sensible with a percentage of the physical problems that people show up with.
Yeah, for sure. Paula, thank you so much. I'm, as we both are very busy people, and I'm very aware of the time that you've given to me today to speak. Really, really grateful for that. So if people want to learn more about you and your work, where's the best place to send them to?
There's a few places there, Ben, and yes, I want to reiterate that for you as well, Ben. That putting yourself forward and putting time into this, that is no small feature of where Bowen is going. So, that's deep respect to you and to BTPA and what they're achieving here. If you want to find me, you can find me at paulaessonclinic.com. If you want to find me teaching, it's at the Bowen College, and you'll probably put that in a statement as well, Ben.
I will be in the description below.
That's sort of where to get hold of us. And I'm quite happy for my number to be there as well, so that can be put out. If you want to contact me and chat about Bowen or chat about treatment if you're in Northern Ireland or Iceland, or turn up wherever I turn up, then we can do that too.
Paula, thank you so much. As far as I'm concerned, you're one of the legends in the Bowen world at the moment, and I think your legacy is going to long continue. So let's hope that you and I are around long enough to be able to see all these beautiful changes taking place. Thank you so much. I've loved speaking to you today, and you have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Take care now. Bye-bye.